Good afternoon and welcome to the fifth of the DTG's Transforming the TV Industry webcast series. 70% of respondents to our recent State of the Nation research identified addressable TV as a key focus area for our industry. This week, we're joined by a team of world-class addressable TV practitioners who will explore with you the exciting opportunities this disruptive technology creates. Take this opportunity to interrogate, challenge and support them via the question and answer box under this window. And now please welcome Jane Ostler, Global Head of Media for Kantar, to set the scene for us and drive the debate with our brilliant panel of experts. Jane.
Thank you, Richard. What I'm going to do first of all is just introduce you to our panelists, Maria from Amobee, Lara from ITV and Justin from Google. And in order, could you just give us a brief introduction to yourselves and what you do, and then I'll take you through the presentation and then we'll go for questions. Thank you.
Good, I'll go first in alphabetical order. So hi everyone, really pleased to be here. My name is Maria Flores Portillo. I am Amobee's General Manager in Europe, which means I look after all sorts of TV-like solutions for both broadcasters and also advertisers. Okay, and Lara, are you next?
Hi everyone, really pleased to be here as well. I'm Lara Izlan, Director of Advertising Data and Analytics at ITV. And my team are responsible for addressable advertising, insights, data products, and measurement solutions.
Cool, thank you, Lara. And Justin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Justin Gupta. I'm Head of Broadcast Partnerships for UK and Ireland at Google. My role is helping broadcasters with advanced video advertising projects in OTT and connected TV. And I previously worked on the red button at Deep Sea Interactive and on content and advertising partnerships at YouTube.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to be asking you all some really interesting questions after this next bit. I'm just going to do a little bit of scene setting, just talking about addressable TV in its broadest sense and what's going on. So thank you very much, everybody. If we start with sort of where we are in the market now, we know that smart TVs are increasing in penetration all over the world, and that's happening in the UK too. Latest Ofcom data shows it nearly at 50% by the end of last year, so it will no doubt be much higher now. There are various players, addressable players in the UK market. I'd say we're still at a fairly early stage of evolution, and that's why it's such an interesting time to talk about it now. There are new targeted advertising specs that have now been delivered. The first open standard dedicated to targeted advertising, because obviously standards are a really important part of the market and the story. We know that from the US, advanced television advertising is on the up. Obviously there the marketplace is very different, but advertisers say that 2/3 of advertisers have bought either OTT or connected TV ads in the last year. And 57%, so over half of advertisers have bought addressable TV ads, by which we mean, they mean household targeted advertising. So it's a really dynamic and interesting and growing market, which is why we are talking about it now. Now, it won't have escaped you that media habits have changed recently during lockdown. So we're in a very mobile market at the moment, I would say. Some recent Kantar research was conducted in a couple of waves up to the end of April, was looking at markets in lockdown at various different stages of lockdown, whether they were in severe restricted markets or just some restrictions, and looked at what consumers said amongst all age groups about their media habits. And actually, as you can see from this chart, it's really interesting. People are spending a lot more time looking at the internet, they're spending a lot more time watching telly, online videos, and on demand and streaming, as you can see, has increased quite significantly as well. And unsurprisingly, at the bottom there, magazines down very slightly, but cinema down significantly, obviously because many people actually couldn't go to the cinema. So this is claimed habits of media consumption. But if you go into a bit more detail, and I won't go into it all, just this chart, you can see here that by channel it does vary a little bit by audience. So you can see that amongst various different age groups, whether it's on demand or streaming, for example, younger groups are engaging more, and they're engaging more with television more generally. So there's some really interesting dynamics going on, and I guess the question is how many of these will last? But I suppose the other thing that we need to consider generally within the UK is that obviously non-ad supported services are also on the rise, and other forms of entertainment, short form entertainment, are also being used by all sorts of different audiences. Actually, there was a piece of Kantar research released last week which showed that 6 million new video streaming subscriptions were purchased in the 3 months to April. And actually a fifth of British households, it's quite a large number, purchased a new subscription during the COVID-19 period. And we've all read the stories about how successful, for example, Disney Plus have been, and obviously Netflix has benefited as well. And households now have about 2.3 subscriptions on average. So they have there's a lot of competing attention going on. And not only that, but short form entertainment is also increasing. So we've seen the rise of TikTok, and it's not amongst just younger audiences, it's also amongst older audiences as well, as people turn to different forms of entertainment and content creation. But with the rise in consumption, ad spend has been hit very hard. And again, we are all looking at forecasts and looking at how quickly this may recover. But if you look at WARC, the World Advertising Research Council's projections for 2020, what they think is going to happen to ad spend, and this is based on a survey of advertisers, you can see that whilst the market has up until last year been growing very strongly generally for TV ad spend, actually this year, by the end of the year, it's predicted to be down nearly 20%, and about just under a third of that is video on demand. In 2021, it will rise up again. It will start to recover TV ad spend generally, and video on demand will actually, be a disproportionately large part of that. But you can see from the chart on the right there that all channels have suffered. Even digital channels, maybe slightly less bad than some of the others. So the question really is, how is the market going to recover? And obviously, addressable will play a really important part in that. It doesn't exist in a bubble. It's a part of a campaign that clients will buy, and it's part of how clients will consider the effectiveness of a total campaign. And channels do all work together. So we know, for example, from our research that social media and online video complement TV very well as part of a campaign. You're not just operating on one channel. And addressable solutions are very effective when they're combined with traditional, high reach or mass targeted commercials as well. And this is from some of our data in the US. So we know that there is a lot of complementary activity with addressable TV and connected TV campaigns. And we know that generally all forms of online video can actually increase reach and reach light TV viewers, so it makes the reach unduplicated. This is a way of reaching audiences who may not consume TVs, regular broadcast TVs, quite so heavily. So it doesn't exist in a bubble, so that's a context question really that we need to address. And then a couple of really quick general points about targeted advertising and relevant advertising. We know that younger audiences want relevant advertising. So the younger you are, you can see on the left there, the more you agree with wanting relevant advertising for you. You don't necessarily just want general advertising. If you're 65 plus, you don't like it at all. You're not interested in it particularly. But advertisers do face this real dilemma, because along with the relevance, comes intrusiveness and potentially getting it a bit wrong. And we'll be talking about this in our session, the panel session in a second. So it's about striking the right balance. So generally, over half of people want to see ads that are tailored to their interests and their needs. But, about the same number, just slightly higher, are concerned that tailored content might compromise their privacy. So there's a really interesting dynamic going on there, and it's a very delicate balance that we all need to get right. So now with that, we are going to ask our lovely panelists the first of the questions. So this part of the session, I think, will go on maybe about half an hour, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end, which hopefully you in the audience will be participating with on the Q&A button. So first of all, I'm going to start with a question for Lara. I mentioned about COVID and what's been happening to media consumption and what consumers are doing, but how has the industry adapted during the pandemic, and what does that mean for addressable TV specifically?
Sure, Jane. I think the first thing to say is to acknowledge that, it is unprecedented and hugely challenging times for the whole industry. I think if I could just make a quick nod towards the people side of things, I think at ITV, and I'm sure at other broadcasters as well, I think we've all, adapted really well to changing circumstances. At ITV, for example, we all moved to sort of a fully remote working scenario within days. And we were able to very quickly find new ways of working, new ways of being creative, with technology in place to ensure that our business could continue despite those uncertain times. So I think, the first point to note is just the people flexibility and how everyone has adapted. In terms of the advertising business in particular, I think, obviously there have been many reports about how the first couple of months were extremely challenging with budgets down and, overall spends down. What we saw was, following that initial shock with people sort of reacting and, changing their plans very quickly. We've sort of emerged from that, and brands have emerged from that initial shock and have started to engage with us and look for ways to partner with us more creatively to get back on air. And what that's meant for us is, in one word, flexibility. We've had to be very flexible and adaptive in the way that we do business. And that includes sort of relaxing deadlines, deferring activity, and also just being a lot quicker, right? And you don't necessarily think about TV as being a place that you can do, media quickly. But we've had to change, and we've had to, offer quick campaign turnarounds, etc. I think the other really big change, and it's actually a change that has been sort of happening over time, but it's one that has been surely accelerated by what's happened, is acting not just as a media supplier to brands and our clients, but actually being a real business partner to our customers. So it's not just about advising on the the inventory and those sorts of matters, but really how could we as ITV, with our knowledge of the UK population, really, how could we support brands with their creative questions, with their questions about audiences and audience need states, and really kind of help them to develop a new voice, that suits the sort of cultural moment. One of the things that you talked about just now was relevant advertising, and we always think about relevant advertising as being relevant to the audience, relevant to a person, but really relevance also extends contextually, right? So that be that contextual to the programming, but also contextual to the cultural environment that we sit in. And I think all of those things came to the fore as we were all adapting to the lockdown.
Do you think, just a sub-question to your point about flexibility, do you think that need will continue for broadcasters? Is that going to stay forever, or do you think you'll go back to your older ways?
As I said, I don't. Yeah, no, that's a good point. So I can't speak for trading in particular, but I think even like I said, even before lockdown, the trajectory was clear. Right, media has been looking for more flexibility, more automation, and I think at ITV and certainly other broadcasters have as well been adapting our strategies cater for that changing media landscape, right? So one of the things that we're doing, which you may know about, is the launch of, we're working with Maria and the team at Amobee, obviously, in launching the Planet V, which is our addressable advertising platform, and that will be launching imminently. And that really underscores our belief and our investment to ready ourselves and ready the industry for these changes in the need for more flexibility and the need for more automation. So the writing was already on the wall, but I think this has surely been a catalyst for some of those trends.
Okay, well, let's move on to Maria next then, because I think that leads on very nicely to thinking about understanding more about how addressable TV is sold and traded, because broadcast TV has been sold and traded in, pretty much the same way for quite a few years. And obviously we have online and digital media has its own sort of ecosystem. So tell us more about addressable TV and how that works in a trading environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an all-encompassing question, I find, because we could be talking about platforms and currencies and lots of things. Try to keep it quite simple. I would say my overall perception of both the UK and in Europe is that lots of interesting things are happening right now, but perhaps the addressable propositions are still a bit scattered, and people still understand, even though the term of addressable TV, different things depending on who you ask, right? So there's cases, there's companies like agencies, grouping with Finecast, for instance, that are trading broadcaster inventory, primarily BVOD, with some third-party data layered on top, and they do that through traditional digital platforms. So that's typically quite interesting for kind of like agencies or buyers within the digital realm, mostly, although there's some TV budgets there too. But they're looking to doing some branding through some TV content. So it's still not kind of like something that would take over a TV industry, but there's those cases, right? Then you go to places like Germany, where addressable TV tends to be defined as some sort of like L-shaped overlays that get on top of your player if you have a smart TV. And the two larger broadcasters over there, RTL and ProSieben, have actually created an alliance and allow buyers to purchase that through a DSP that belongs to one of them. So it's kind of like, I would say that some of the initial attempts to get to addressable TV have actually come more from the perhaps digital and programmatic world and tapping more on digital budgets. But I think what's very interesting is obviously that broadcasters are stepping up in a big way. In the UK, we've had great innovation coming from Sky for many, many years, and they have exported that innovation to other countries in Europe, but obviously Comcast has had it as well. And that, I guess, has been the main example of what people would really understand by addressable TV, the advertising in the stream based on data, especially if that data is high quality, right? In the case of Sky, they've picked the data directly from the set-top boxes, which is phenomenal. What ITV are doing is similar. Or the leverage in their wealth of data to be able to inform all of their ITV Hub sales. And we're seeing many, many other broadcasters taking their own initiatives and trying to figure out what kind of data is best. A lot of this sales still happens in a more traditional fashion, I would say, either on a direct sale basis or with platforms that they market themselves, like ITV with Planet V. And I think what we will probably see in the years to come is a bit more consolidation of all of these models so that you can use addressable in a more sort of like upfront fashion and less so in a more sort of like tactical or niche objectives from the brands. I think in the future, hopefully it will not be called addressable TV, it will just be called TV, but there's some level of consolidation and normalization across the industry that we all need to figure out, because it's a little bit scattered, as I said, right now.
Okay, so it's fairly early stage and still a kind of fragmented market, but some signs that operators are going to collaborate, at least on the technology on the technology side. We'll come more onto some of those themes in a second, because obviously I think we do want to do a bit of a deep dive into data in a second. But thank you. And so, Justin, what I'm going to ask you now is more a question of, obviously we are in a sort of a global media market, global advertising market. Can you just describe your view of, perhaps contrast the UK and our progression in addressable versus the US, the progress there in the US? I know they're very different broadcast markets to start with, but can you just point out some of the highlights and the differences?
Sure, and I think it all comes down to how you define addressable, as Maria said. And I think if we look back to the different ways that you can do addressable TV, that may help us unpick this a bit. So firstly, if something is streamed over the internet, such as a TV service in an app, and the ads are delivered with the content, we often call this dynamic ad insertion or broadcast of VOD, depending on whether that's live or on demand. That's been very popular in the US. The US moved to OTT much quicker than other markets. I think the high cost of cable subscriptions was a driver for that. And then secondly, we have in a set-top box environment, this is where the ads are stored locally and replaced in real time. So Sky have been doing this, as Maria said, with Sky AdSmart since 2014 on both VOD and live channels. And the way this works is overnight your Skybox downloads ads over essentially channels that are off air. So it's a very neat technology which they're now exporting to other markets. And it was actually something that was possible before everyone had high bandwidth internet. So it preceded OTT, I would say, at scale. And thirdly is the newer model. So if you're on a connected TV during live viewing, we now have the capability to switch from broadcast content to personalized ads streamed over the internet. And there are a few trials underway to do this using new standards such as HbbTV. And as I said, I think the US has been quickest off the blocks with the internet streamed addressable TV, but also in coming up with new measures, new ways to measure the ads on connected TVs and also to trade the ad space programmatically. Where I think UK and Europe have been ahead is in this set-top box environment with Sky AdSmart, allowing advertisers to target on a much more granular level, and also this more nascent standards-based approach for HbbTV, which is prevalent in Europe, but not in the US. But for addressable TV to truly work, it needs to be available to be traded, targeted, and measured in an equivalent manner on all TV platforms. And I think that's where a lot of the work is happening today to make this a compelling proposition and less fragmented everywhere.
Okay, I think that's there's some really good insights into the differences between some of the markets. And yeah, it's not a question of who's ahead and who's behind. We're all just approaching this in slightly different ways. I want to move on to some of the perhaps myths or preconceptions that some people may hold about addressable TV. Some of the ones that we thought of were maybe it's a bit more performance advertising as opposed to brand campaigns, or maybe they've got limited reach. It's not really for big brands who want to reach lots of people, or it might be just for younger people or something. And obviously there are various different platforms that are offering addressable now, but what do you think some of the misunderstandings were? I'm just going to go around you all briefly. So if it's all right, I'll just start with Lara again. What do you think one of the myths or misunderstandings is?
I think it goes back to what someone was saying, the definition of addressable, and at some stage, there won't be addressable TV, it'll just be TV. It is just TV now. So, just to be clear, when we talk about addressable TV or broadcast of VOD, is what we're talking about in terms of the addressable inventory that we'll be offering via Planet V. It's 70%, large format environment. So we are really talking about TV, and from a user perspective, it's just TV. And so, that's, I think, the first thing to note and to remember. And so it's quite difficult to, try to draw parallels with other types of video inventory that, may be used for more performance-oriented campaigns, for example. So I think, taking a step back and just understanding that it is still TV and it's useful for all the different types of campaign objectives that that TV is good for, and that spans the entire sort of marketing funnel, as it were, from the brand awareness piece through consideration, through conquesting, when in terms of brands that are bringing new products to the market, and all the way to kind of driving action and purchase and transactions. So I think just to debunk that one myth, addressable TV is TV.
Okay, it can do anything. You need to decide on your objective when you start, I guess. Okay.
Absolutely.
What's your perception of what's the biggest misconceptions that you hear about addressable?
Yeah, no, I would definitely second what Lara said, because I think one of the misconceptions is the notion of reach, right? That this needs to be a bit of a niche buy, and that you cannot get reach. And I don't think that's the case. It is true that you need to have a platform that gives you access to sufficient inventory, right? In the case, I think, Lara, speaking from ITV, having the entirety of the ITV hub at your disposal means that you're going to get reach, obviously. So that's one. But also most of the use cases that we're seeing in more advanced markets like the UK are definitely not necessarily about a niche buy, or kind of like in the past, I think some of the addressable started with auto brands, car brands trying to buy a specific postcode, and even here in the UK, right? But it's not like that anymore. I think what brands are really using addressable for is to be able to optimize their media plan in a much more dynamic fashion. So they may have actually committed to a lot of money in the upfront, but what they can do now with addressable TV is make sure that that money is properly distributed. And if they were expecting an audience to be very strong in a program, let's say, or in a day part, and that audience is not quite showing, then they can start redistributing all of that. So it's more about effectiveness of the budgets than about being super, super, super granular. And I'm actually quite pleased about that. I don't think people should think of addressable TV in the way that they would think of programmatic advertising. It's more about making sure that your marketing pounds or dollars are working a lot harder.
That's really useful. So the effectiveness is a thing to focus on, and also that plays to our earlier discussion about the need for flexibility as well, which I think is an interesting dynamic there. So Justin, what's your favourite myth about addressable that you'd like to debunk?
Yes. But I think it's not just about trading, it's about capabilities as well. And this is an opportunity that hasn't really been captured yet by advertisers. So you get a couple of extra capabilities with addressable buys. So one is clickable TV ads if you're watching on your mobile phone. So click here and your pizza will be with you before half time is one of my favourite campaigns I've seen as an addressable campaign. Another is around having the capability to do creative evolution and customization. So essentially personalizing the ads in some way, shape or form. And this could even still be for a mass reach campaign. So you could imagine this could be creative evolution. So you might have this mythical car advertiser who the first time you see the ad shows you the outside of the car, the second time you see the inside, the third time you see the dashboard, the fourth time you see the price, and the fifth time it directs you to your local dealership. Now that may be a campaign that everybody is getting, that was bought up front, but is customized for the viewers. You can also imagine a world where the adverts themselves have a personalized component. There are a lot of implications around the production and distribution of ad creative to bring this reality into being. But it's not beyond technical capability that you could show a different end frame for the same ad in every geo, much more granular than you would be able to do at the moment, which is a function of TV distribution. For example, on terrestrial, the most granular you can do is an ITV region, which is 1/15 of the UK. Now you really could do this down to city or postcode level to some degree. So I think the first phase of addressable is enabling advertising space to be traded in an addressable way. But I think the second phase, once most inventory is addressable, then people are really going to think, and marketers are going to think, okay, now I have this capability. How can I use the fact that I can follow through on the targeting of a creative, or I can customize this for specific segments of users? How can I use that even in a brand marketing campaign?
Okay, that's really.
If I could just jump on Justin's point a little bit, because I think it's a really important one, and it's one that it was quite heartening to see during this, during the early part of the lockdown and the period of uncertainty, that people were, bringing their focus and attention back to the creative. I think in our space, in this sort of quest for data and technology, ever improvements in data and technology, I think that creative component gets lost in the mix quite a bit. And as Justin said, you can have that mass reach, but addressability, I guess this is another myth. Addressability is not just about targeting. It's a two-way street. You're also getting insights back that you may not otherwise get from a kind of more traditional TV landscape. And just a really quick example, we had a client test board with us for the first time. They were buying linear TV. They had 5 creatives that they would run in sort of random rotation. But when they tested on VOD, on addressable, what we could do was to tell them, which audiences were working best against each one of those creatives, and those learnings they could then take that back and apply that to what they were doing on linear as well as taking it back to the sort of the production and creative development process. So I think that creative element is hugely important when we're talking about addressable.
Yeah,
and if I can just follow back. Sorry, I just wanted to say, so there's a huge opportunity for standardization in how we support these kinds of use cases across the market. At the moment, if you're an innovative advertiser, you can work with your media agency and a specific broadcaster to implement some use cases like this, but it's almost impossible to do it at scale across different platforms. And I think that's one area of collaboration we're going to see over the coming years as people start to become more comfortable and accustomed to what the kinds of possibilities are and how we can enable those across every TV platform, because that then creates an opportunity for everybody.
Yes, I think that's...
If I can... Oh, sorry. Go on.
Yeah, go on. That's fine.
Hot topic.
No, first of all, thanks for bringing up that point, both of you, the whole kind of math versus art of addressable, because I think, one of the reasons we all fell in love with this industry is just the artistic nature of advertising, right? Something that you don't necessarily expect on a digital, more transactional experience type of thing. But I think one of the myths, going back to your question, Jane, is twofold. One, that addressable needs to be very expensive, which does not need to be, but it still is in some cases, as Justin was mentioning. There is a collective effort we all need to make as an industry to standardize certain things like creative evolution or many other things to make sure that this is an experience that works for all parties. Because addressable, again, to my previous point, needs to be a way to make things more effective for everyone. And there's some work to do to make sure that we get there.
So I think we are again at the early stage of this, but it's really important, I guess, to emphasize to anyone who's starting to use addressable advertising that it needs to be intelligently used and strategically used. And I agree with you all, the importance of creative is vital. We know it's the major contributor to effectiveness of campaigns. So, and I want to move on to talk a little bit about data, because obviously that's one of the drivers behind the possibilities that exist for addressable TV. Tell us about the importance of data. We'll start with you, Lara, but I'm sure you've all got a point of view. What's important in the data? Because we're looking at a mixed environment again, data that comes from the broadcaster, the platform, but data from other sources as well, so syndicated data and audiences as well. So What's the data story from your point of view?
I mean, I've got the word data in my title, so I am going to say that it's hugely important, just in case my boss or anyone else is watching. But in all seriousness, it's a key part of the ITV strategy going forward. It's something that our CEO, when she first joined ITV 2.5 years ago, and we set the strategy, data and technology was a core part of how she saw ITV evolving going forward. And there's been significant investment made into people, talent, platforms, capabilities, across the board. Data is hugely important. Obviously, when I'm talking about data here, I'm talking about the 32 million registered viewer database that we have, people who have registered with us, and to whom we are committed to, first and foremost, providing quality programming, quality entertainment, quality news, etc. And that is first and foremost, right? And then off the back of that, how do we find ways to fund those products and services that we offer through advertising? So straight away you see that there is a value exchange there. So I think when it comes to data surely is important, but so is that value exchange, with the consumer, with the viewer. So we are fully transparent about the use cases for the data, the applications for the data, in making the entire experience, a much more positive one for them at the end of the day.
Do you have anything to add on that, Justin, at all, on the importance of data?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we're moving to a world where many people are accessing content through services where they're logged in. And unlike the old TV broadcasting of old, where everyone is at the end picking up the same signal, everyone has now a one-to-one interaction with the content owner or the broadcaster, which creates all sorts of possibilities. It's not uniform, though. Different TV platforms will have different levels of data depending on whether they're a one-to-one platform, whether there's an intermediary, such as a telco involved in a set-top box, or whether it's just still mass reach with just the ability for some customization. And the data is, there's kind of three uses. There's the targeting use case, which I think we've discussed. There's the measurement use case, which I think is just so important. And this could be the kind of the killer feature of addressable TV over other forms of TV advertising, in that you will be able to get just much more granular data on how campaigns have performed, what works, what doesn't. And then there's the ability to feed that data back into insights. And if you're a broadcaster, there are people in other departments who can really get value out of the data we learn from the advertising business, which is very, very data rich, to inform other things such as commissioning or ad load or all sorts of things. And kind of the one last thing is, since we're kind of moving into kind of funding models and discussions, many broadcasters are at that point now where they can decide with their digital propositions, am I going to be a subscription service, am I going to be ad funded, or something in between? So I think it's very exciting seeing how people are using this feedback loop that never really has existed in TV before.
Yeah. Certainly, it's a very dynamic time, and I think you're right. I think we will start to see hybrid models potentially emerging, whether it's part subscription, part advertising funded models. Maria, did you have anything to add about data and the importance of data, whether it's from an industry point of view or a consumer point of view?
Yeah, I think I'll probably start by the industry. I'm also very excited about all of these kind of initiatives from different broadcasters to put, the data to work, to be able to grant addressable propositions. What I would say is that what the industry could probably benefit from is a more consolidated currency, right? And there's ways to do that. Many countries in Europe already have a panel that encompasses TV and digital and so on, and they're bringing that into the fold for their own addressable propositions, the broadcasters. I think I'm kind of like expecting to see that level of consolidation. If you look at other markets in both Asia and in the US and how things are working over there, it's much simpler for everyone, simply because there is a much more established currency to do addressable, right? In the case of the US, it's Nielsen and so on. The fragmentation in Europe and the regulation in Europe has made things harder. And you can even see, how these global companies like Nielsen or even Vizio for connected TV and so on, have struggled to either invest properly or focus properly in the market. So I think we're going to see a tone of change and a tone of attempts, for this specifically for measurement, I would say, to kind of like, try to create the right standards. Because I think from a buyer's perspective, because we tend to serve buyers quite a lot, the simpler it is, the easier those budgets go into that place. And the sooner we can perhaps consolidate TV with addressable TV, even if it's all TV, I think the sooner advertisers will also consolidate their own teams and invest very, very heavily on this. So I think we're still kind of like getting to that tipping point in Europe and in the UK. But I'm loving the initiatives that I'm seeing, and there's incredible work, very, very creative use of data from the player, from the linear stream, Freeview, and whatnot. So I'm looking forward to these propositions this year.
So it's a time for the industry to be creative as well, I think, and how this all evolves. I'm just going to make a little shout out to the audience here. Just a reminder that there's a Q&A button at the bottom on the nav bar at the bottom, and you can input any questions. And in a few minutes, we'll go in there and ask our panel some of the questions that are in there. So if you want to put them in now, then please go right ahead. So moving on from data, let's move on to what's happening right now in the TV and advertising market. And as we come out of lockdown, advertisers start to renew their expenditure or increase it back up to perhaps the levels that they had previously. Do you think that this innovation is going to lead to a surge of investment? Like, is now the time to invest in addressable, to experiment and to find out how it works for your brand? I'm going to start with you again, Lara, then ask everybody.
Sure. This is a theme that we've been talking about a lot, actually, just in the last few weeks. I think as brands are emerging from the current crisis, there is more pressure than ever to show short-term results that can also ensure long-term survival, right? So, I think for the first time, maybe in a long while, you've got long and short-term objectives working in tandem, and you need your media to be able to deliver both. And what we've been saying is, as brands are emerging cautiously back into the media environment, it is the perfect time for experimentation. It's a perfect time to figure out how to make your budgets work best for the objectives that you have, and those objectives may be ever evolving. Hence the need for a test and learn approach. And personally, we think, for all the reasons that we've already talked about, data, feedback loop, the ability to have that granular level insight into audiences, addressable and broadcast abroad in particular, because it is large screen and brand safe, feels like a really good place for brands to experiment. To kind of look at those audiences, to look at those measurement solutions, to figure out what best works for their campaign, use the feedback loop to see if their business objectives are being met, and build from there. I think we're starting to see that sort of appetite coming back, to in terms of the conversations that we're having with our clients today.
Okay, actually, that was a very comprehensive answer. What I'm going to do now is we've got a few questions going on the Q&A, and if it's okay, I'm going to go to those because I think there's something for everybody in there as well, and I want to make sure we have enough time to cover a few of them. So one question is, how can we stop addressable TV or connected TV being the golden goose of media investment? And golden goose is when, I guess, the expression means when you kind of get really overexcited about something, you kind of really pile everything into it, and then you get bored, and then you walk away, you exhaust yourself, and you run out of enthusiasm. So how does the market, how does it pace itself so that it remains relevant and it evolves at a sensible pace? Let's go to, I don't know, Maria, if you've got any point of view on that, about how the market's going to evolve.
Yeah, and thanks for the clarification, because my understanding of golden goose was completely different. I've learned an expression. Thank you.
I just looked it up, actually, so that's what it means in the dictionary. So let's go with that definition.
Yeah, otherwise, I don't think anyone would have understood the answer. Look, I think, well, there's a couple of things. One, addressable has been here for a while, in particular with, again, so like more digital strategies or Sky Ad Smart. So I struggle perhaps to see this as a golden goose at the moment. I think there's a lot of initiatives in market that are becoming more and more prominent. But to perhaps to the point of the question, the way I understand it, the important thing is for this to work, right? So if advertisers see that there is increased effectiveness and that the workflow itself is sufficiently simple, they will run to that, right? Like they run to many other platforms before. So it's all going to be about the value that addressable can offer. And to that extent, I know I keep perhaps, saying the same thing, but it will be important that some of these sort of like initial addressable initiatives find some common ground to make things easier for advertisers. And I'm not saying there needs to be one single standard, but this should be a sufficient scale and data and simplicity of measurement of these propositions so that advertisers can really focus on that. If you put a ton of different propositions, each of them, kind of like works slightly different and so on, it will be very difficult to make media plans work and to fully understand, the entirety of that funnel, which is really what addressable is trying to bring into the market. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think that's a sort of, acknowledging it's complex and complicated, but trying to keep it simple so the proposition is simple, I think is important. And Justin, did you want to add anything to that point?
Yeah, so I mainly work with broadcasters, and it's definitely the case that since the pandemic, the addressable projects that were already underway seem to have raised in importance for some of the reasons that Lara and Maria stated. And from my perspective, I think the shift to digital has accelerated a bit. I mean, it's driven by this kind of consumer behavior. We've got like broadband usage up between 50 and 80%, depending on which stats you read. And even my parents are now telling me to go and watch stuff, you'll be very pleased to hear, Lara, on ITV Hub. I don't think they even knew what that was before the pandemic. So it's a question of how much of that consumer behavior sticks, but definitely the size of the opportunity has become front and center, and the future-facing nature of this opportunity, because really where we sit, and I'm sorry, Maria and Lara, you'll have heard me say this in the past, we have a Venn diagram of TV ads on the left and digital ads on the right, and where it overlaps in the middle is addressable, and it's messy and it's fragmented, and every project seems like a one-off at the moment, and it frustrates people from both sides of the house. The digital people say, what do you mean I can't do, fully interactive ads? And the TV people say, well, what do you mean it doesn't follow the BARB gold standard of measurement? So we haven't quite got there yet as a thing. It's TV ads delivered digitally, That's essentially what it is, but it's not being treated as a thing in its own right. And whether it just becomes TV, as I think Lara and Maria suggested, or whether it becomes its own thing, which has a slightly different way of being measured and traded, is yet to be seen. And I think it all comes down to, when does this reach a sufficient scale that people don't have a choice and it needs to be seen as the priority? And at the moment it's not, because the other sources of media are larger.
Yep. Okay. So still got some way to go, I think. And there's a question for you that's come in, Justin, specifically. I've got one for all of you, but fairly quick answer to this one, please. Now, given that you work in the addressable space, do you still see relevance in the ability of mass audiences that linear TV delivers in terms of being able to drive top of funnel customer demand, brand building, which will support marketing strategies? So, what about mass audiences? Do they still have a role to play?
Yeah, absolutely. Addressability is a capability. It doesn't follow that you need to use that capability all the time. You're still going to have the X Factor ad breaks or the Premier League ad breaks, which are the highest value ad breaks that we have on TV, and those are still going to be sold ahead of time at a very high rate. There'll be mass reach brand campaigns, and long may that continue. Where I think addressable brings more value is using data to increase the value of other ad breaks potentially, or also bringing new capabilities to vary the creative in new ways. And I think it's going to be some time before we unlock that, but please don't stop your brand campaigns. Brand marketing has a proven track record and continues to work, but this is another tool to add to your marketing arsenal to allow you to do other customization. And for sure, there are proven benefits in the performance side, but I think the real opportunity for addressable sits in customizing brand campaigns in the future.
Okay, thank you. One for you, Lara, just another quick one. Actually, it's not a quick one. We could probably talk for 2 hours about it, but my suggestion is that you don't. Customers might be comfortable with very targeted advertising online, but are they wary? They might be wary of targeted ads on TV, and might they think that, might they worry about how that data is being brought to bear in terms of targeted advertising to them? So how's that addressed?
Sure. I think, I guess it's the level of targeting. So we talked a little bit before about the importance of data. And I think, one element there that we didn't touch on, but maybe we should, is just because you can technically collect every data point you can, imagine, doesn't mean you should. And if you had, thousands of data points at your disposal, as we do, it doesn't mean you need to use all of it for your use cases, right? You need to kind of find the right balance for various things, for the audience, for the context, for the the device that users are consuming media on. So I guess when I can see that someone is worried that they may have searched for a pair of shoes online, and then they think that they're going to see that pair of shoes following them around on TV. The way, unfortunately, it happens on sort of some digital channels. That is not the type of user experience that we would ever want to create on TV. So I think it's going to be much more nuanced than that. And it is our responsibility as the advertising industry to figure out where those lines are, to figure out where those principles are. There are regulations now in place that help us to do that, but it is all of our responsibility to ensure that we're using data to enhance user experience, on TV, especially as TV goes into addressable and programmatic and, more automation.
Okay, thank you. And one for Lara here, which is, you mentioned earlier, one for Maria. You mentioned earlier about consolidation or potential consolidation in the industry and how it's kind of broadcasters are collaborating in some some markets in Europe. Do you think that, initiatives in the UK with ITV or others will be collaborative? Will there be more collaboration in the UK, or will we see the evolution of platforms continue in parallel to see what works and what doesn't? What do you think that looks like?
I actually think, since I have experience in a few markets in Europe, in the UK, the broadcasters have always had pretty healthy relationships, and kind of like speaking to each other and making sure that they took the right decisions for the TV industry as a whole. So I would definitely not be surprised if there's more collaboration. There's been collaboration on BritBox, for instance, right? There's been collaboration on Sky AdSmart and so on. And I think we'll see more of that in the future. As I said, I do believe that a world where there is the right amount of scale and data in the platforms will make life easier for the industry. So yeah, I definitely predict that. And we're also seeing more efforts of similar fashion in quite a few markets in Europe. So I do think that it's a time for broadcasters to get together and to be the ones on the driver's seat, really, as opposed to perhaps what we've seen in other markets where it's more of a either buy-side proposition or kind of like digital ecosystems proposition. I think Europe is quite unique because of how TV has worked in the past and how data and the measurement works. And it's going to be very exciting, I think, to see how things pan out in the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay. There's one question, we're nearly there. I'm just going to answer one question very quickly and then a quick fire round with you all about the future. So there's one question in here about, do we think that after lockdown, the increase in registrations to subscription services will drop back as people start to go back to school and go back to work, etc.? And will there be new hybrid models, with funding part ads, part subscription? I think there will be a degree of dropping back in subscriptions. Maybe at some point people will realise that maybe 2.3 or 2.6 or 5 or however many they have might be too much. There will be a review point, and there's only a certain amount of time in one day. So I think at some point there will be subscription fatigue, but maybe now is not the time to understand whether that's going on. I think it's really important. It's actually part of work that we do is we track that and we can tell who's swapping to what service. So it'll be interesting to monitor in the next 2 to 3 months. And ongoing. I think the hybrid models thing is related to that question because it's really related to the success of the platforms and whether they're able to make enough revenues on their current models. So I think we'll just have to see how that one goes. But I would suspect that a hybrid model will come into play. Maybe 1 or 2 players will start to at least experiment with it quietly, possibly. Very quick, literally 10 seconds each. If you have to focus on one thing that you think is going to happen to addressable TV in the future, where do you think it's going in the future? So let me start with Maria. What's your big bet?
Sorry, what's going to happen to addressable in the future?
What do you think is going to be the future of addressable TV? But really quickly.
Well, I think unsurprisingly, I would say it will be a future where it is possible to buy TV content across kind of like any screen in a very sort of like simple fashion. And it is possible as well to adjust the creative experience to your target audience.
Okay, thank you. Lara?
So I think we always think about addressability, or we think about addressability today, we equate it with targetable audiences, so audience profiles, audience behaviors. I think what the underlying data and tech will enable us to do is much smarter contextual tagging. So more interesting object, semantic, emotional metadata that we can gather from video, from the programming. And that will create much, a lot more interesting opportunities in terms of how we do planning, targeting, optimization, measurement, etc.
Great, thank you. And Justin, your quick version of the future.
Yeah, so I think we'll enter a stage where all media will be delivered digitally and will therefore become addressable. And that will be driven by technologies such as 5G, and addressable will include addressable audio, for example, in smart speakers. And I think with screen technology coming down in price, addressable advertising may be available on every digitally enabled surface in your home, Jane.
Okay, wow. All right. I think that's a really good place to end. I think it's a really good vision for where things might head towards. So thank you very much, everyone. And I'm just going to hand over to Richard now. We've got a minute left.
And thank you, Jane, for a great presentation and sharing the session today. And thanks to our brilliant and insightful panel, Maria, Lara and Justin. I'm in no doubt that bringing together creativity driven by brilliant tech is pure alchemy. So I'm very excited about the future. So thank you. Finally, thank you for joining us today, the day when the Premier League returns. And I look forward to seeing you at our next webcast on Thursday, the 16th of July, where we will be conveniently exploring innovation in live sport with Facebook, Kantar and some other special guests. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Great. Thank you.
Well done.
Bye.